Okay. I'm sure you've heard your parents discussing income taxes as they were due April 17th this year. For most of us, this is a painful time as we have to figure out how much of our paycheck should be given to the government. Very depressing. Anyways, we can all blame Abraham Lincoln for instituting the first income tax back in the Civil War time. At this time though, it was only 3% of your income. Today, the average American pays 20% of their income to taxes.
The government also instituted luxury taxes. These are taxes placed on goods that are considered wants and not needs. Things like fancy furniture, pool tables, silver platters. The government also issued government bonds. We have discussed bonds before, so this should be a review. Bonds are simply IOUs. You give the government money in exchange for the bond certificate. After a predetermined amount of time, you exchange the certificate back to the government for your original money plus interest.
The Union also began to print more paper money. In fact, they began to use paper for all types of money, like this in the picture. No more coins. Why do you think this might have been? If you guess, they needed all the metal they could get their hands on for weapons and ammunition, you are correct. However, as you should all know by now, printing more paper money without specie leads to inflation. By the way, this paper money became known as greenbacks.
As is true today, being in a war can really boost a nation's economy, especially in the defense industry. Since more men were in the military, women and older men worked in the factories.
In the South, they too tried to institute an income tax. However, no state truly supported this income tax or enforced it. It was a complete failure. Instead, they had to institute a tax in kind. This allowed farmers to pay with a portion of their crop instead of cash. However, this didn't do the government a whole lot of good. Bonds were also used in the Confederacy as well as printing more paper money. People didn't have faith in the Confederate dollar, though, and it was valued worthless. The Union blockade will truly hurt the Southern economy since they relied so heavily on foreign trade.
All right, let's look at our blanks. 3% was the first tax. Then we have government IOUs. Printed paper money leads to inflation. And it will be, we're missing.
Failure.
Well, right here, the greenbacks.
Oh, sorry, greenbacks.
Also go there. And then right there, resisted.
It's a failure.
Okay, and then right there is their crops. And then the blockade will hurt the Southern economy.
These two men led their sides throughout this war with great leadership, and both were well-respected men.
Let's first look at Ulysses S. Grant. By the way, that's not his real name. His real name is Hiram Ulysses Grant. However, when he signed up at the West Point Academy, they messed up his name and put down Ulysses S. Grant. So he decided to keep it that way. Probably never liked being called Hiram. He adopted the S to stand for Simpson, his mother's maiden name. I like this quote Grant made about the war. I have never advocated war except as a means to peace.
Remember, it will take Lincoln a few years to find Grant and make him his official general. Grant actually had quit the military after the Mexican War and had to work his way back up through the ranks. Once he was put in place as general, things really turned around for the Union. They began to win battles and achieve many of their goals against the Confederacy.
Now this quote about Robert E. Lee really sums up how awesome a general he was. General Winfield Scott fought in the Mexican War and also started as the general for the Union during the Civil War. Here is his quote. If the President of the United States would tell me that a great battle was to be fought for the liberty of the country, I would say with my dying breath, let it be Robert E. Lee.
Lee was asked by Lincoln to command the Union Army. However, like we discussed before, Lee felt it was important to support the South, his homeland. Unfortunate for the Union, because they really could have used his leadership. This war might have been over in 90 days then. Lee was a West Point graduate. He was also an expert military strategist, as we can clearly see throughout most of the battles. However, President Davis also felt he should have a say in what was happening with the Confederate military. He and Lee disagreed and argued over many battle strategies. Davis was kind of a control freak and wanted to have control over everyone and everything.
Here are some other noteworthy generals of the Civil War. As we stated before, Scott will serve as the first commander for the Union. However, he was quite elderly at this time and retired quite soon after the war began. General George McClellan will follow as commander after Scott. He was really good at drilling the soldiers and organizing the troops. However, he wasn't the bravest when it came to confronting the enemy. He retreated many times from battle, kind of a wimp.
General Ambrose Burnside is quite another character. Look at his face. This is where the term sideburns comes from. Isn't that funny? William Tecumseh Sherman was quite an interesting fellow as well. He will be responsible for carrying out total war, a Union strategy that we will discuss later.
He just looks angry. Look at him.
Custer, he's going to be known as an Indian fighter eventually. Custer and Sheridan are other names you have heard or will be hearing of in these battles.
Stonewall Jackson was considered Lee's right-hand man, or his right arm. He was a very good officer and did well for the Confederacy until his untimely death.
Yeah, I know, because I put it there.
No, it's in those notes.
Oh.
It's
also in these notes.
Right arm.
I know, I get it.
Okay, I don't know why we're arguing about this. I'm going to go back and start again because I'm sure by now you're quite distracted. All right, so Stonewall Jackson was considered Lee's right-hand man. He was a very good officer and did well for the Confederacy until his untimely death. More on that later. I just love this next guy's name. Pierre Gustave Toutant Beauregard. It's not a cool name. He will actually be hired by the Egyptian army after the Civil War to train their guys. Stuart is another popular guy. Nathan Bedford Forrest, if you've seen Forrest Gump, this is who he was named for. He is also the guy who will be responsible for starting the Ku Klux Klan. So in other words, not my favorite guy.
Many of these guys graduated from West Point, and some fought in the Mexican War.
Okay, we've never gotten enough. That's amazing.
We know, you are ready to talk about some of the battles. Hang in there, we're getting there.
The Union's first part of their strategy was to blockade all southern ports. They realized how much the South relied on foreign trade, and blocking this off would take a devastating toll on the South. The next part dealt with the Anaconda Plan. They hoped to divide and conquer the Confederacy, slowly suffocating it to death like the snake.
By seizing control of the Mississippi River, they, the Union, would cut off Texas, Louisiana, and Arkansas from the rest of the Confederacy. Texas was actually really important to supplying cattle to the Confederacy, and once again would cause a lack of supplies for the South. Next part of the plan included capturing Richmond, Virginia. This was the capital for the Confederacy. It was actually less than 100 miles away from Washington, D.C. The Union hoped by capturing the capital, they would be able to capture President Davis and the rest of the Confederate government.
The Confederacy planned to simply fight a defensive war. Let the Union come to them. They also planned to gain support from the foreign countries who relied on the South's cotton production. Their overall goal was to simply wear down the Union, and hopefully Lincoln would lose support and the North would just give up.
Let's review your blanks real quick, even though we said everything very plainly. Blockade southern ports, seize control of the Mississippi River, capture Richmond and the Confederate government, fight a defensive war, and Lincoln. Okay, now for some battles. The first major battle of the Civil War will be the Battle of Bull Run. It is also referred to as the Battle of Manassas. Bull Run is the name of the creek that ran nearby, and Manassas is the name of the nearest town to where the battle took place. In July of 1861, the two sides met face to face. Believe it or not, but hundreds of picnickers came out to watch the battle. They thought this would be so much fun to see what exactly was about to happen, like a form of entertainment. You can kind of see them right here in this top picture, bringing a picnic basket to watch the battle. Oh my gosh. They thought, okay, it's important to point out again that both sides thought this would be a simple, short-lived war. People were very unprepared to see the reality of this war.
McClellan, the wimpy guy, leads the Union forces while Stonewall Jackson leads the South. Jackson actually earns his nickname at this battle, for he stood there like a stone wall and refused to give up. McClellan and the Union were on their way to Richmond as part of their strategy to take over the capital when they were stopped by Jackson.
As he will truly prove himself to be, wimpy McClellan scares by the tough Confederates who stand their ground.
Scared by.
I was thinking like scares easily. That's the kind
Well,
of, okay. All right. Whatever. Scared. Whatever.
He was scared.
He was
McClellan
scared. McClellan orders a retreat. Surprise, surprise. As the Union forces scatter, they left many supplies behind. Jackson realized the importance of supplies already at this point in the war. Instead of pursuing after McClellan, he and his rebel soldiers will pick up all the Union supplies.
The significance of this battle is that it was the first true major battle. It also showed both sides that they would need training, especially the North, and the war would be long and bloody.
So here you should have picnickers, you know, like people with picnic baskets. Here you should have Richmond, retreats, and the significance, first major battle of the war. It showed both sides they would need training and the war would be long and bloody. Here again we see some of those actual photographs being taken during this time. Matthew Brady is one of the most famous Civil War photographers. And again, most of it's going to be aftermath of the battles because it takes a long time for the pictures to actually come out. Oh my gosh, that's hysterical. Okay.
All right. I think these ships are so amazing, especially considering the time period we are talking about. Ironclads will be used for the first time in our history. Basically, they took wooden ships and attached iron plating to every side, including tops and bottoms.
The Union named their ship the Monitor. Since the Confederacy really didn't have access to a ship, they captured one of the Union's, the Merrimac, and after cladding it with iron, they named it the Virginia. The Virginia and the Monitor will meet head-to-head in March of 1862 off the coast of Virginia. As they each fired cannons, they discovered that they were doing no harm to each other's ships. The cannonballs just simply bounced off of each other's hulls.
However, this will change naval warfare forever. Look at these pictures of these boats. They sit so low in the water due to the weight of the iron. It seems so strange, almost like a, what do they call it? A submarine. However, they actually did have some submarines. The H.L. Hunley will be a Confederate sub that actually sunk a Union ship.
Seen lots of good
Did we look at our
bonus
blanks?
questions
Did we
here.
look at our
No,
blanks?
we didn't look at the blanks.
All right, first use of ironclad ships. The Union ship, the Monitor, and captured Union ships remade into ironclad called the Virginia.
Grant is a high-ranking officer during this time. However, he is not the commander. That will not occur until 1863. This battle will take place in 1862. Grant is on his way to attempt to gain control of the Mississippi River. As he heads south, he will be surprised by Confederate forces led by Johnston. In the end, the Union forces the Confederates to retreat.
Out of 100,000 men that fought that day, 24,000 will die. The significance of this battle? Most casualties of any single day in the war. All right, so
You know what? That's the wrong significance.
I'm sorry. That is incorrect.
I'm sorry. Let's erase that. That is what I had written down, but that's wrong because that's Antietam. Okay, the Battle of Shiloh is significant because the Union gains control of the northern part of the Mississippi River.
Okay, so the Union, right down here, The significance: Union gains control of the northern part of the Mississippi River. Okay, let's go to the top. Grant will lead troops toward the Mississippi River. Confederates will be led by Johnston. Right there, it's Grant, surprised by Confederate forces, had to wait for reinforcements. And then Confederates to retreat. The Union troops force the Confederates to retreat.
A bloody day at Antietam. That's right, Antietam. That's how you say it, not Antietam, Antietam. It's in Maryland. Remember? The most important border state. Let's change that.
Anyway, Lee has plans to invade the North. However, his battle plans will be captured by Union forces. McClellan now holds Lee's strategy in his hands. What shall he do with such an important piece of information? Actually, in this instance, McClellan does head off Lee in the Battle of Antietam. 24,000 men will die in one single day. We told you that about the last battle, but it wasn't true. It's true about this one. 24,000 men will die in one single day. Lee retreats back south to Virginia. However, McClellan doesn't pursue. That's showing your true colors, McClellan. You see, he always had an excuse. Not enough men, not enough supplies. It was always something.
The significance of the Battle of Antietam? Most casualties of any single day in the war. I mean, that's like almost half of Flower Mound dead in one day.
Wow.
And here in this picture, you can see some of those dead soldiers.
You know, we talked about photography, and do you have a slide later on?
I just said this on the last slide.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was looking at my phone. Okay, so let's look here. I was just going to give you that.
Who's this guy? Who's this guy right here?
Standing heads above everyone else.
Oh, I can't imagine. Could that be Abraham Lincoln?
All right, so over here to blank, Lee moves north into Maryland. Down here, 24,000 die. Lee retreats to Virginia. And of course, oh, Lord. Your significance is that most casualties of any single day in the war.
Let's take a short moment to look at this map of where things stand at this point in the war. Here we see Fort Sumter, first shots of the war. Bull Run up here, first major battle. Monitor versus Merrimack, which was also called the Virginia. This was the ironclads. Then, of course, we have the Battle of Shiloh. Look at New Orleans. The Union Navy, well, I guess I didn't have to really specify Union since the Confederates didn't really have a Navy. Anyways, the Navy will attack and take control of New Orleans. With Shiloh and New Orleans, the Union has almost complete control of the Mississippi River. Dun, dun, dun.
All right, at this point, both sides have realized how long and bloody this war is truly going to be. Both sides will have to call for a draft. The Union will call for their draft in 1863. All men between the ages of 20 and 45 will be forced to put their names in for the draft. This is kind of like the Hunger Games. The government will pull out draft cards at random. If your name is pulled, you will be forced to join the army. However, there were always exceptions. In the North, they allowed you to hire a substitute or pay $300. And people with important jobs like engineers, railroad conductors, government workers, etc., would be exempted from the draft. I do have something to add here that I know Ms. Bradley doesn't have later on. This $300 would be equivalent today of like $15,500.
Oh,
I only know this because I also teach this in Texas history.
As you can imagine, I just knew you were going to say this part. As you can imagine, this caused some uproar in the North. Some begin calling this a poor man's war. Basically, if you were rich, you could pay your way out of the draft. If you were poor, you were more likely to serve. See the issue? Draft riots broke out throughout the North as a result of these policies.
This quote is actually a rich man's war, poor man's fight.
Sorry.
Rich man's war because they stood to gain everything, but he was fighting the poor man.